we're going to cover another New York story, and it really is just a New York story, because you wouldn't hear this about in Oklahoma or if you were down in Texas somewhere. But just, to me, a fascinating story about these courts and about what is kosher pizza.
Right. This involves not only the competitive world, the knockdown, drag, hard knuckle, bare knuckle world of pizza, but also it involves the insular world of the Hasidic communities in Brooklyn. This one happens to be in Crown Heights. And it's a dispute between two pizza shop owners that wound up not in civil court, but it wound up in a Beth Din, which is a rabbinical court in Orthodox communities across the world, but certainly in the Crown Heights and Borough Park and other Hasidic communities in Brooklyn and in Rockland County. And we're getting Yosef Rappaport on the line, who works in some of these courts as a counselor. It's almost like a lawyer. In other words, someone who has a knowledge of not only legal, secular law, but also of religious texts and rules. So, Yosef, thanks for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Glad
to be here.
Yeah, so you saw the story that I did in the Times about this dispute between two pizza owners on Kingston Avenue in Crown Heights. And, I just thought the way I started the story was just providing context for New Yorkers and people who aren't from New York about mentioning other pizza disputes that have, over price or over recipes, which even had, mob figures, doing a sit down about, your store on Staten Island took my store's recipe in Brooklyn. But this is one of a different nature, of a different topping, as it were, where you have on Kingston Avenue, you have a restaurant called Basil, which is a little more of a sit down white tablecloth dining place, but one centered around, it's one of its menu staples is, specialty pizza. And then you have a new shop called Calabria that recently opened and started offering kind of also specialty pizza. So the first owner sued the second owner for kind of being too similar in his business approach and his business plan. Now, in capitalism rules, this wouldn't be grounds for anything, because that's capitalism. You could try to compete. But according to religious law, Jewish religious law, there is a certain law that comes out of the Torah, the Talmud, and other religious interpretive texts that says you're going to explain it to me, but you can't imitate someone's business too close to their business in a small town where you're basically kind of gouging the first guy out of his business plan.
Yeah, that's about it. But if I read your article correctly, there was more than just competition. There was an accusation that they were stealing customers in this store and the competition.
And the recipe, right?
Yeah, and the recipe.
Right.
So
which the second store denies. Yeah.
So there is, yeah, of course. So I don't know. I didn't list the case. I'm not familiar with the case. But in general, we live in modern times, and the concept of in Hebrew it's called asagat gvul, which means you're encroaching on somebody's territory. That's the closest to the literal meaning of the word. And stealing somebody's livelihood is something that is forbidden in the Bible. That's the concept. But in our times, it's not always the case. When you open up a shoe store next to a previous shoe store that you're stealing business, maybe more shoppers will come to that street because this is a shoe area. It's like opening up a diamond store in the diamond district. Is that competition, or is it's better for the entire market?
Right. Yeah, sometimes it's a symbiotic relationship where more than one can be better for everyone. And that's what, I think that's part of what the first owner says. He was trying to start a bit of a restaurant row in this area. Now, for people who don't know, this is in Crown Heights on Kingston Avenue, which is, basically it's an area that's still mostly Hasidic, but it's also an area where there is a Caribbean population, West Indian population, and also, like a lot of Brooklyn, a lot of young professionals kind of what they call gentrifying the area and spreading and that kind of thing. So it's definitely a mix. And so I think that, they're trying to vie for the Hasidic / hipster crowd. We're trying to get a wider audience. So it's kosher pizza, but, it's also, gourmet pizza. I mean, anyone would find this, an attractive place to go. But let me just get to these Beth Dins, or these rabbinical courts that kind of, I guess it's this, in this Hasidic community, this is almost takes the place of suing somebody in civil court, state court. So talk about this a little bit. I mean, a lot of people who aren't in these communities don't know what these places are. They're usually it's a panel of 3 rabbis who hear these cases. And there's a plaintiff and a defendant, and there's a little courtroom, and it's hardly elaborate. I mean, this one was in Borough Park, and it was above a synagogue, but just happened to be above a synagogue. They don't have to be. They can just be rooms with, it's a regular courtrum setup. So talk about these courts.
It could be in somebody's basement.
And they hear divorce proceedings and other things, right?
Correct. Some of these courts, do hear highly complex cases, and that are commercial in nature, and some of them are matrimonial cases. Some of them are patrimony. There's virtually any dispute that could go between 2 people by Orthodox Jewish law. You mentioned Hasidic. It's not only Hasidic. It's anybody
Orthodox, right?
Yeah, it's Orthodox. Anybody who's Orthodox is obligated from religious obligation to first seek relief in a Jewish court.
Is that right? Yeah. But let me just ask you. So the rabbis are the judges, and they're really going from the Torah, the Talmud. I mean, this is really like almost a spiritual background for the judgments, right?
Yes. As some of your listeners might know, Jewish law encompasses not only ways to live spiritually and comply with the ritual demands of the religion, like kosher laws, but there are laws that apply to torts law, to divorce, which have their counter alternative in the secular courts. These courts, when they handle commercial disputes, inheritance disputes.
How about trip and falls, those type of things? They say ambulance chasing type of things.
Yes.
I hurt my neck in the accident. Can you get that adjudicated?
They do, but
is there dollar judgments, money?
Yes. Well, you asked a very good question. There are peculiar laws that come from the
no fault.
Proper ordination of rabbis has ceased for more than 1,000 years. The Jewish courts that operate see themselves as not a direct having proper ordination. It's a technical issue, which means that certain areas of Jewish law cannot be adjudicated, and some of it has to do with torts and punishments and things like that are not.
So criminal stuff, right? You can, like if.
Oh, criminal, of course not.
Right, okay.
We live in the United States.
Right.
But it should be known that
it's all civil matters, right? Basically,
mostly civil matters. Yeah. But even in torts, certain claims like pain and suffering, certain cannot be made and cannot be claimed in a Jewish court. It's highly complicated. But just to elaborate a little bit. They see themselves as an arbitration court seeking compromise. The foremost obligation of a Jewish basin is to seek ways of peace, right. to bridge the gap.
Right.
So there's a lot of pressure on both sides to come to a compromise, and it's actually by Jewish law it is. When they sign the arbitration papers, they're actually giving them authority to impose on a compromise. In effect, de facto, this is what ends up being the case in the overwhelming majority of the cases. They are nothing more than compromises.
Yeah, Yos, I want to talk particularly about the pizza thing. Can a non-Jew get access to this court and just to say, my pizza's kosher and it's not? Do they rule on that? Do I put a K up in my window like the ABCs now for the health warning that my pizza is kosher, the other guy is not kosher? How do you get the word out about that? Just say you win the victory that the other pizzeria is not kosher but mine is. How do you get? And is that worldwide? Is it binding or is it only to Borough Park? or Crown Heights?
No, it is binding. It is binding to everybody.
I mean, they signed an agreement beforehand that whatever the
Yes,
rabbi's ruling is, they're going to go with that, and it can be used as a document if you want to take it then to civil court. That the civil judge will respect the rabbi's decision in his judgment, right?
In most cases, you're correct. These agreements are upheld time and again by the Court of Appeals up to the highest courts. You sign an agreement that these three people should judge my case, and they are enforceable except in custody battles where Jewish law differs. In secular court, the child gets a representative, right? They get their own lawyer and looks out for the interests of their child. It's not a concept that is recognized in Jewish law, but we live in America, we live in New York State or in New Jersey. Jewish courts try very, very hard to follow to the T the laws of the state, to mimic all the requirements so eventually when somebody wants out of the agreement, they could break the arbitration agreement as it pertains to custody battles. But the judge will review what happened in the Jewish court, and we'll see there were forensics, there were psychologists, there were proper procedures followed. That will make the person who wants to break the agreement. It makes them makes for them a bigger challenge.
Yeah. In other words, there is a respect from our governmental civil courts for the evidence, the testimony, the hearings, and a lot of the case that already
even when the law does not require that.
Yeah.
Just because the rabbis comported themselves in a proper way, they earn the respect of the reviewing court.
Yeah. Now, as to John's question about do Gentiles ever get to participate in these cases, or does it have to be two Jews? I mean,
no, we don't have to be Jewish, but that's probably a rare case. But it does happen. It happens sometimes when there are multiple partners. Quite often, when there are commercial interests between Jewish and non-Jewish partners, and then they have a matter that should be must be adjudicated with another Jewish person. Sometimes people examine the law, familiar with the law, experts in the law, say, "Hey, you'll do better in the Jewish courts." Yeah. So they go to the Jewish court.
All right, like court shopping. Now, you said a lot of this goes on in Yiddish. The proceedings are in Yiddish, right? I mean, especially if everyone speaks Yiddish. But because I had heard these plaintiff and defendants in the pizza story they were Israelis. So, I mean, I was told it was in Hebrew. But you said it's usually, often, especially in the Hasidic communities, it's in Yiddish, right?
Yeah, they're conducted in Yiddish.
But the rulings are given, like you said, in Hebrew and even ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. I mean, I'm assuming it's because it's quoting ancient scripture.
When you quote and you use principles of that are established in the Talmud, which is mostly in Aramaic. So that's a mixture between Aramaic and Hebrew. But they try to be very clearly not to use flowery language. It should be easily translatable if it's challenged in secular court. Yeah.
So when the money is awarded, is it like in shekels or something or whatever?
No.
So everything else is more
greenbacks, Jeffersons.
Right. It is. It's in dollars. So no, I was grateful that you were able to help me with this story. And one thing was that I was able to connect with some of the rabbis who heard this case, which I felt I was lucky to talk to them because I usually don't see that they do a lot of press, let's say, and so it was very interesting to talk to the three judges, and I asked them about the set. I was curious about what is the courtroom like. I mean, is it it's like a simple kind of room. Yes, they have two tables for each party, and they sit in front in kind of a panel or almost a dais, and then but they said there's really nothing. There's no court reporter or stenographer. They take the notes. There's obviously no bailiff and no, it's just them. I mean, there may be a rabbi in training who's observing, but this is just it's just a simple hearing. Right?
Some courts do have different standards, but it's of their own making. It's not required by Jewish law. But it is amazing sometimes where you sit in a simple room with folding chairs and folding tables and enormous amounts of money is at stake.
Yeah.
And lawyers are there and accountants are there. So maybe it's something that we could learn, where to spend our money, what's important and what's not important.
Right. Okay, well, listen, we're going to wrap up, but I do want to give you the chance. I don't know if this is appropriate, but you are a counselor in these. They call it a toain. You represent clients mostly in divorce proceedings, right?
Yes.
So where you've done a lot of things. I mean, you've run news. I mean, you've been a journalist. You've run a newspaper essentially, and you won't say it, but you're a big deal in Borough Park. I'll say it. You're the man. I mean, everyone knows you. And your son Alexander has always been nice enough to connect me with you, and he's the man too. But he is
listening.
The junior man.
Give him
I
a
should
shout
say,
out.
So he runs Masbia. So I'll give that a shout out, which is basically a kosher soup kitchen, and does a lot of great work. And but would you? I mean, do you hang a shingle for this? I mean, can people get in touch with you if they need a divorce lawyer in the Jewish courts? I mean, how do they reach you, or do you want to be reached, or what? You have a Yelp page?
Right now, we're in the process of establishing. We already had hearings. We're probably establishing a new Beth Din. There's a great demand. So I'm in between of being a counselor and being a secretary of a new court. So in between gigs now. So I'm reachable. I'm online. People can see me. Some people can message me. It's not.
How do you? I'm on social media or something? Or?
Yeah, I'm on social media. Also, Rappaport. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to reach me.
It's Joseph Rappaport. I'm with Rappaport. That's his. Can I suggest that as your slogan, or have you already? Has that been co-opted?
Yeah. Well, I've had so many people. I am Rappaport.
I am Rappaport. I like the way you tweak that. Yeah. So Joseph Rappaport. I hate to say Esquire, but the Rabbinical Court version of Esquire, right? I mean,
that's okay.
He's a toain. Yeah. So okay. Well, Joseph, thanks a lot as always for coming on.
Always a pleasure.
Okay.
Well, Corey, that was the Goyim Hour, trying to find out about these rabbinical courts. I didn't, because I had to go out and put money in the meter, and you don't know what it's like to cross Atlantic Avenue, because I got to face the car heading towards the Brooklyn Bridge, because if I face it this way, it takes me about 20 minutes to get the car legally to go in the other direction. So it's so
you park with the preparation already, like knowing that where you're going to leave after the show?
Oh, my God. I plan
thinking
it out.
Ahead.
Oh, my God. Because the other way, I got to make a right, go down to Pacific, and then come around. I mean, it's a nightmare. So trying to cross Atlantic Avenue. Now, I don't know if he answered the question. Can a non-Jew bring proceedings?
He said yes. We didn't get too into it, but I was surprised, actually.
Yeah.
I guess you can.
Now, did you go to the court hearing?
I didn't go. No, well, I missed it, to be honest with you.
It's not open. It's not open to the public. No.
Oh, he's still on.
It's not open, so no one can just sit in on it.
To the public,
only with permission of both sides, of course.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
And that's a rarity. It's almost
but listen, was the pizza case solved? What came out of that?
Well, with the pizza case they basically sided with the plaintiff mostly, saying that yes, the new guy can't make pizza exactly the same as the plaintiff, and the second guy never said he was making it exactly the same, but he's making square slice, specialty pizza across the street. So the court said, nah, it's too close. You're too close. The shop is too close. The pizza recipe is too close. You're going to have to make New York style pizza, and that's all. I left it at that. So the second guy's like, what's New York style pizza? The first guy's like, it's round pies. You can only serve round pies.
No Sicilian.
No, essentially no Sicilian. There was no stipulation about that. So he kept making he changed it a little bit, and he kept making square pizza. So they haven't completely resolved it, and the first guy may actually take him to court if it doesn't get resolved.
And Yosef, is there such thing as kosher pizza? And could you put a K up on your window to state that you're kosher, the pizza?
Yeah, according to New York State law, and this went through to some constitutional challenges, consumer protection law is that if you put a kosher sign, the only thing you need to do is you put up a sign and say, who is the certifier? Nothing more. You could be certified by Corey Kilgannon.
Right.
What?
But wait a
Rabbi
minute, though. But this is-
Kanganin.
Right, that's-
Oh. I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm very strict. I don't think anyone would barely pass my test. But Yosef, let me just say something. I didn't realize, because I'm not in this world. There are so many levels of kosher certification. Now, I'm just learning this because of the story, that, there is the top certification, the OK, the OU, and then there's lower. So, if you don't get that, you can settle for the low. And customers in the know who, follow this stuff, they want to see it. They walk in, they want to see the certification, they want to see who certified the restaurant, and they may walk right out. So this was part of what was at stake here, especially for the second restaurant.
Yeah,
if he couldn't win this case, he couldn't have a shot at the best certification, and he's going to have a lot of customers who are not going to go there. So this was really heavy. This was heavy stuff, for them.
Right.
Real heavy stuff. And so most certification agencies, not all, or I would say a few of them, operate two separate, but it's the same organization, two separate courts. One court that certifies the kosherness of an establishment. The other court deals with disputes of all kinds of matters. Once there is a ruling that you are not in compliance, you're rebelling against Jewish law, you're not following a verdict, it's very easy for one organization to call another organization, I think you should take down the kosher certification, and they will do it promptly.
Yeah.
Now, there's no protection for anybody. This is a religious certification. If it's taken down, you might as well close your business. Of course, there are differences between levels of, in all matters of law. There's a strict interpretation and there's a lenient interpretation. Certain kosher standards are more lenient. There were disputes for the last 1,000, 2,000 years of what is kosher and what is not kosher. Some organizations take a lenient position. That's perfectly all right. And some want, no, I'll go out and eat. I want to have 100% kosher which has the minimum amount of disputation about the kosherness of what I'm eating. People take religion seriously, but most people don't really pay too much attention. They want the best. They want the best certification. That's where they go out to eat, and that's what symbolizes which group they belong to.
Okay. All right. Oh, well, that's great. I mean, we could pick this up next time. It's a whole nother. The kosher thing is a whole nother depth. But thanks a lot, Yosef, for coming on. We'll talk to you next time. Okay.
Well, Corey, the things that you get mixed up in now, you're Rabbi Corey Kilgannon. If you need your piece of kosher, are we getting Rose on next time?
Yeah, we'll get Rose on.
Okay, we'll get
next.
Rose on.
Right.
She'll be coming on.
Right.
You know what? This is how you settle it. You go to Katz's Deli to Second Avenue Deli. I don't have to worry about who certified it or whatever. I get my pastrami on rye. It's kosher. That's it. You know what? It's confusing enough going out and trying to get something to eat. If I got to start looking at the wall to see the ranking of the rabbi that rabbi, he's a little bit dodgy. I don't know if he got all his degrees lined up. And who is he to certify pizza? I mean, this is it is unbelievable.
Eating is very complicated.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the next story, as Corey has his electronic Rolodex. I don't know. Was she a character of the week or just a regular
on Sunday?
story?
Yeah, on Sunday.
Yeah, because it just a lot of times with your stories, I think they're interchangeable. Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
You write about one person on Wednesday. Well, it could have been on Sunday, and the Sunday person.
Wednesday is Sunday, wasn't that?
Yeah, is that the new Sunday?
Yeah, that was Carvel, right? So we have on the line Rose Romano. Rose, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Rose is visually impaired, and she's telling me that's a better term. This is the proper nomenclature, not blind, because blind is it's got connotations of like groping in the dark type of stuff. People have it. So Rose is visually impaired, basically since birth, and grew up in Brooklyn, East New York, and now lives in Howard Beach. And she spent more than half a century teaching other visually impaired students at Helen Keller Services for the Blind here in downtown Brooklyn. And that's where she ended her career, but she various locations throughout the decades. And she lives a fiercely independent life. And something she was raised by her father to, not seek all kinds of help, but do for herself. And she's got a great personality. She's a very feisty woman, very tough woman, very nice woman. So I wanted to have her on just to talk about, not only just who you are, but also the write-up. You said that since the write-up appeared in the Times, that you've gotten contacted by some people from your past. This is your life, Rose Romano. So, talk about some of the feedback you got from being written up in the Times, Rose. As you said, the blind leading the blind, but in a good way.
Well, one of the people that contacted me was the lady who first brought me to, we were called IHB, Industrial Home for the Blind at the time. She was the social worker that opened up the case.
Meaning she got you in to the place, right?
Yeah, she brought me
job.
There for, I think I explained to you, Corey, in those days, in order to get the Commission for the Blind to help you or, assist you in any way in terms of, like, helping you to get a job or whatever, you had to go through an evaluation. So she opened the case. And I couldn't get over what a lady, I thought she was the social worker. And social workers to me were all old ladies with laced up shoes and cracking voices, etc. And here's this normal lady who had kids and, was full of life and all the rest of it.
That was what I thought of you, Rose, when I met you. I was like, this woman is like a real knock-around gal here.
Okay. So, and she told me about her children and this is, a family life, in other words. So when I got to the agency and started to go through training, she was still there. And, of course, came to, address me, and we talked, etc. And as I made progress, like career-wise and all of that, she and the various other professionals in the staff really adopted me. I mean, they took me to lunch. We went to lunch together. We did all kinds of things together. And, after that, she left. She went to move to California, and I kind of lost track of her. But she saw the article on Helen Keller's website, and she called me. Now, this lady is close to 100 years old. She's sharper than anybody I know. And she was absolutely flabbergasted that I was still around and, left me her number. And, of course, I called her. She's living in Westchester. I have to figure out a way to get there to go see her.
I like that she's 100 and she's flabbergasted that you're still around.
Yeah, right. Right.
But, Rose, let me just ask you, jump to, like, I'm going to ask you a bunch of blind questions now. I mean, there's no other way to say it. But I mean,
that's what you should do.
But on that very subject, I mean, do you find that you kind of get objectified that way, where sighted people who are not in the visually impaired community, let's say, well, what's it like being blind? How do you match your shirts? And, all these things that I kind of had to ask you, for purposes of the article. And does that get tiresome? And do you have to, like, tell the person, like, I'm a regular person, I'm not just like some person with a cane,
You know what, Corey? I made up my mind. The only way I was going to educate people about visual impairment and being blind and living, etc., was to repeat all that stuff time and time again and teach. I look at it as I'm teaching a class.
Right.
So when somebody asks me a question, I don't care how dumb it is, I answer it, and I try to answer it in a respectful manner because I don't ever want to turn anybody off.
Right. But do you ever get, like, where people are, like, almost talking down to you, like speaking slower? I don't know what, but in this way, I mean.
Loud, sometimes loud.
Right.
But not as much as in the past, I will say this.
Yeah.
And another thing I think is extremely important is when you're dealing with children, I don't care what they ask, what they do, because I really feel that's where we're going to teach the regular population.
Right.
I mean, it is better than when I was a kid. It's better than when I moved in the house. I mean, when I moved in the house, they all were flabbergasted that I could fold my own clothes in the laundry room.
Right.
This is, I guess, any disability runs through the same thing. But this is.
Let me just ask you a couple etiquette things, like for people, general population people, like people, you see a blind person at the corner. Should I help them across the street?
Yes.
Should I tell them, watch out, you're going to hit the bus stand?
No,
I mean, you know what I mean? Is there a point where it's too, like, I can...
No, because I always feel I'd rather someone ask me and not need it than need it and someone not ask me.
Right.
So if you go to the corner or somebody's standing at a curb and you think they need to cross the street, or if you don't think they need to cross the street, what's the harm in coming and saying, can I help you?
Right. But, I mean, you might do it for something that's so simple, Right.
So what?
Yeah. Okay.
That's not the point. The point is to offer the help. If they say, no, I'm okay, that's fine. And if they're nasty, just figure it's a jerk and go on to the next person.
Well, does that happen? I mean, usually you're going to be a nice person who offers the help.
No, don't count it down.
Well, I mean, I could see a potential like crime happening, but aside from that, where someone's going to try to relieve you of your handbag or something, but.
Oh, well, that too. But no, sometimes some people are saying, they think they're being independent by being nasty, and that's not true.
Yeah.
But if you find somebody, particularly crossing the street, I can't tell you how that important that is, and offer your arm so that they can take your arm and you can help them across the street.
Yeah. Right.
We didn't do that. We should have. But we didn't.
Right. No, we should have walked around. Well, and the other thing, here's another question, dopey question, is, you think, I mean, just the things that I asked you, like, matching clothes and just household things and stuff. I mean, not to mention the outdoor stuff and, it's public transportation and the bus and all this stuff. But I mean, I was interested in what you said about the matching the clothes and putting tags in the clothes. I mean, or just knowing from when you buy it what it feels like, and it's a print or it's a solid, it's a
right.
a pattern. Just talk a little bit about these. These are kind of like just basic little, quotidian type of things that, you have to solve that equation, first.
Okay. In terms of clothing or matching anything, I mean, you can do basic like I do with, between texture and style and that kind of thing. Or you can there are braille labels that you can put in the item. There are little figures you can sew into the item. There's something called a colorino, which is a gadget, like a little device that tells you the colors of the item.
They have that now, huh? A color finder.
Everybody does things in their own way. No matter what we teach, you usually find your own way to do something.
Right. Yeah.
We could teach fundamentals, but we usually, the person finds his or her own, way of doing something.
And speaking of teaching, I mean, I witnessed this, and you told me as well that, there's no point in coddling these students when they come in to learn from you. I mean, they're going to have to, stand up and face the world, even with their visual impairments. And you've been known like as a tough taskmaster, where you didn't try to, be overly nice and you were trying to protect them from things, right? I mean, part of, learning is to really get it out in the world.
When I started again, the idea is vocational assistance. So you're talking in terms of a person going into the real world, getting a job, and holding up their end of the bargain in terms of being paid for the job. Now, in the old days, many times you'd go into a job, and there would be parts of the job you could not do. You needed vision for. So often what we did was, let's say the visually impaired person would do all the phone work and cleanup work and stuff like that, and the coworker would say, do the filing and whatever required vision. Now, due to technology and stuff like that, we can be really pretty reasonably independent. So that doesn't exist anymore. But the whole idea was, if you, Corey, go to work on a job, you have to prove yourself. So if I, Rosemary, go to work, the first day they might like it and think it's cute and this, but the second day they want you to carry your end of the job. So it's up to us to be able to do that. And it's up to us, and it happens. People are nasty. People sometimes have gone out of their way to people to, because they're afraid they would catch this disease or something like that, so to make it hard for the person. I mean, that definitely happened.
Right.
Maybe not so much anymore because we're a little bit more politically correct, but it happens.
Yeah. Rosemary, John McDonough here. I'm a yellow cab driver, and I remember back in the 90s there was a sting set up by the Taxi and Limousine Commission. They had a blind person flag down the cab, get in, and when they got to the destination, the person said, here's a 20, take out $1 for yourself and give me back the change, when it was actually a $50 bill. And they were testing the driver, would he just take the 50 and give back the change out of the 20 or not? And I would have to say a lot of the drivers did not pass the thing. But how do you navigate taxis? I don't get that many blind people taking taxis, but it just seems very difficult, particularly now where everything is credit card, just about. You have to know what percentage on the tip and everything else. But on the cash front, that is something that I don't know how you can tell the difference between a 20 or 50 or a 5 when you're handing. Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of money, I'm trying to. I hesitated because I'm trying to think of a way of explaining it to you. Right. It's up to me to keep my money straight. Okay, so there are ways. Various people fold it. Like fold the singles one way and the tens another and the fives another way, and like that. Also, you can have separate compartments in your wallet and keep your money straight. So it's up to me. If you're taking me somewhere, and when we get there, it's up to me to know my money. I've not run into that, but where the driver cheated. But I know I do know it happens.
No, it does happen. But I know you say it's up to you, and that's great. You want to be independent. But listen, the driver has to have a little credibility, or a little honesty.
Well, this guy, yeah, true. But this guy stinks anyway, and he will do something else to bother or hurt somebody. Also,
you're right about that.
Okay. So, I mean, it has nothing to do with really the visual impairment. It has to do with he's a jerk.
Yeah. There you go. That's universal, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And okay, well, Rose, it's always a pleasure. I knew it was going to be funny with her. So, Rose, thanks a lot for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon. Next time I go down Cross Bay Boulevard, I'll definitely pay a visit. We'll get a cup of coffee.
Okay, fine.
You'll show me around the neighborhood. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine. Take care. Have a good day.
All right, thanks. Even where she's responding, well, that cab driver ripped me off because I gave him the wrong bill. Not that he did something wrong. Now that's
right. You're very. Very,
like she was saying that
I
did it wrong.
I
shouldn't have handed him that 50. He ripped me off. It just. Will we be heading to Astoria shortly, or what do you think?
Yeah, we should call him, Richard.
Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, we're going to talk to the Doorman historian. He's going to tell us about.
You know what I noticed too? A lot of your stories
Bridge.
are coming out of Queens. Now we went from Howard Beach. We're heading to Astoria. The taxidermist from Middle Village. There's.
I like Queens. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters out there. The last of the characters.
Right. I wish I could say it was like a tax incentive, or then there's no reason. I don't think.
Because Manhattan's getting a little thin on the ground. I guess unless you have rent-controlled apartment and are fairly old, that's where you're getting a lot of your stories within Manhattan.
I mean, if you're talking about percentages of interesting people, with like everyone has their own definition, obviously, but as far as my column and the characters, I mean, Manhattan, everyone knows this. Manhattan is getting, it's a little more, they're professionals. The people are a little more, they may be as interesting, but it's not like, as external and like, exaggerated and stuff. People are a little more, I guess you would say, restrained and,
right.
As what Manhattan's like. It's just, a lot of people from elsewhere come and make their careers, and you got to have a lot of money to live here. And so it's definitely, each borough has this type of person. And, I drive. So, it's, you can cover more ground in a place like Queens in a car. Manhattan, what are you going to leave your car somewhere and get it's harder to navigate in a car. Yes, I do take the subway.
You know what? I was going to compliment you. The time we left here, because of Sarah Fearon, the comedian / real estate agent, she was treating us to lunch at the Friars Club, and you were driving Malachi and me, and I forgot to pay you to come. You drove like a yellow cab driver. The way, particularly, I think we were going down Park.
Is that really a compliment, though?
Well, yeah, because of the way you were getting around. Like, you didn't stay in the left lane and wait to make the left turn. You hooked the right, and you came in from behind, and there was a lot of little things you too could drive a yellow cab.
Listen, coming from you, I mean, listen, that's high praise, man.
Yes, I forgot to tell you that day. Yes.
Well, I appreciate it. So we're going to go now to Richard Melnick. Richard is, I was going to say by day, actually by night, he's a mild-mannered doorman on the Upper East Side in a nice residential building, and greeting the residents and that kind of thing for 32 BJ local. And by day, he's a historian, mostly of Astoria and Long Island City, and we're having him on now because I think he's a great guy. No, but that too. But we're having him on now because it's the centennial of the Hellgate Bridge. It's the rail bridge that spans Queens and the Bronx, and it's used mostly by freight trains and Amtrak trains. And so, Richard, thanks for coming on.
Hello, thank you, Corey, very much.
Yeah, so you're still doing the doorman job?
Yeah, I've been there 18 years.
You haven't turned the historian thing into a full-time revenue provider.
No, right? Well, it works out that I can't make the money I'm currently making as a doorman. So it's
Right.
It's just a hobby for now, but it occupies a lot of my time.
Yeah. Well, which one?
The Historical Society. I'm a licensed New York City tour guide, and I also do the lectures and walking tours and such.
Right. So listen, I'll get to the bridge thing in a minute, but I just to back up and say, just to flesh out this, so you work the graveyard shift. You work, what is it, midnight to 8 type of thing? And
yeah, right around that. Yeah.
And does that fit into you? I mean, I remember when I did my story on you about, maybe it was 5 years ago or something. No, probably more than that.
Back in 08, yeah.
You did a lot of research and writing and compiling and a lot of your historian type of stuff during that shift, instead of, either snoozing or staying up or, drinking coffee to stay away. You kind of used your time very wisely, because I guess there are some hours on the overnight that do get a little less busy, right?
That's correct, yeah. Like I said earlier, if I don't occupy the night, if I don't embrace the night, it will slay me. So,
nice.
If I work with it, and sometimes time goes by quickly where I've run out of time on my current night, but the job comes.
You mean
first.
You wish like the shift would keep going? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. Well, that's probably never the case. Yeah. But I'm doing so much stuff that it starts to get busy around 5 a.m. and I have to put my paperwork away for the next night. But once the building is secure, I can do the history stuff.
Just on as a side note, I wonder how many people, like the doorman in your building, you have no idea what this person's into. I mean, they could
no.
The whole thing. And I met when I did the Bell Boulevard story, John. I met one of the guys. I asked one of the guys in the bar who I was like interviewing and talking to. I said, "What do you do?" Oh, he's a doorman in the Upper East Side too, and this guy's like an English major, and he's really into his study and his English. So I mean, not that that's so unusual, but I mean, it's just these jobs can be kind of almost placeholders for making some money on the side and supporting your real passion.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that I have weekends off, so I don't fiend the daytime as much as I still can go out on a Friday or a Saturday night and see friends and family and my lady. And so during the week, it's not critical that I miss a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night anywhere.
Right. So now let's get to the Hellgate Bridge. I mean, I think is it April 1? That's the centennial of maybe the bridge opening, the first regular train going over?
I think so. Yeah, that was the official ceremonial opening with the fanfare and such. On March 9th of 1917, they ran the first freight trains through, and then on April 1st, they opened it up to passenger lines.
Right. And how important of first of all, it's kind of an iconic bridge for Astoria people, because, anyone who goes down to Astoria Park by the East River where the Hellgate waters are, right? Where the East River goes up past the Upper East Side, maybe East Harlem, and then kind of like makes a right turn and goes out into, the Long Island, what's going to become the Long Island Sound. And,
right.
And right there, that, right next to the Triborough Bridge, just north of it, is that Hellgate Bridge. And it's very distinctive looking, big iron thing, hulking thing, 100 years old. Supposedly, I heard it has more than 1 million big fat rivets in it, right?
Yeah, Dave Frieder is the bridge man. He has all of that information, yeah. Well, the East River's a 16-mile tidal strait. And the Hellgate just happens to be right around mile number 8, so it's the halfway point of the river. But New York we're spoiled because we have so many large bridges.
Yeah.
Whereas the Hellgate Bridge, while it's spectacular and monumental and a marvel of technology 100 years ago, it's been surpassed by the Verrazano and the George Washington Bridge and such like that in terms of length. But in terms of its strength and structure, the Hellgate Bridge is it's the only bridge of its type in the world that's 4 tracks. So it's quite a colossal structure.
I mean, kind of unsung though, right? Because no one, you can't drive over it, you can't walk over it. If you take Amtrak, you can go over it, or if you work on freight trains, you can go over it. But I mean, not too many people have actually used it personally, in the grand scheme,
That's correct. You can see it from Gracie Point. If you go to Gracie Point in Manhattan, where Kosher Park, all of that, you could see the Triborough Bridge and the Hellgate Bridge in the distance. But a lot of New Yorkers don't know about it unless they've had to take an Acela or an Amtrak train up to Boston or something. That's the only way you would get onto that bridge.
Right. Yeah. No, I had a story about 5 years ago about the painting of the bridge and what a kind of crazy process it was, where they painted it right when they first built it. So maybe 50 years it lasted, and then it started to kind of fade or whatever, and they had and then
started to fade right away, pretty much.
Is that right? And then I remember when Peter Vallone Sr. was the speaker of the council, maybe in the 80s. He was trying to get federal money to repaint it, which is no easy task. It's a big bridge. It's high up. It's not like painting your living room. But the thing was, they wanted to get the right paint, and that wouldn't fade, and it's metal. And you can't go out and buy some gallons of Rust-Oleum. I mean, and it was a big thing, because when they finally got the thing painted, they had changed the type of paint, and it faded almost immediately, and everyone started suing each other, and it became this big fiasco about how to paint the Hellgate Bridge. So I thought that was an interesting part of its
the
life.
Hellgate red seemed to be a bust right there.
Right, it's this fierce red color. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no, I know we wanted to stay on the Hellgate Bridge, but I just wanted to ask a Doorman question.
Sure. You can toggle between these things easily, right, Richard?
Richard,
I'm ready.
I'm a yellow cab driver, and I have a one-man play about driving a cab for 40 years now. And one part of the play, I talk about I get stuck in the medical vortex up in the Upper East Side, where I have to take someone that's going from Park Avenue to Sloan Kettering, and then somebody's getting out of Sloan Kettering, and I'm back to Park Avenue. But I talk about the uniqueness of the Doorman up on the Upper East Side with blowing the whistle, which still happens.
So old school.
Your head goes up and you're looking around, and also there's a red light up on canopies. Now most people are driving that you don't see that much anymore, but it used to be.
Right.
Later on at night, if you saw the red light on the canopy going off, you would make the U-turn and come back to the Doorman. And do you still have that out of your? I don't know what type of building you're at.
I've seen buildings with the red light, or sometimes it's a yellow light.
Right.
But otherwise, no, we have no whistle and no light. We just have to go out and raise the hand and hopefully we can catch somebody.
Do you hail cabs for residents?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Now, are you finding it less and less now with Uber?
That's correct. Yeah, a lot of the cab drivers and the TLC guys have told us that Uber's almost running them out of business.
Yeah.
All right.
And the price of medallions, is being reduced also.
But John, didn't you say that there was sometimes scams where like Doorman would, they slip the Doorman a certain amount, like a 20, and then he'd always get your, what was that? Wasn't that?
That's at the hotels.
Oh yeah.
There's a price range for a LaGuardia fare, a Newark fare, and a JFK fare.
So for the best,
because when they're bringing out the tourists, they always go to, oh, you're looking for a cab? And if you paid him off, he'll bring them to your cab, which is parked, a half block away, and he'll put the luggage into the back of your cab. That's how that works.
Right.
Which is, all BS. Out of the regular building, say on Park, Madison, and Fifth, no, you wouldn't get that happening. But listen,
that's unscrupulous, and I would have no part of that.
Oh, right? I know. Either would I. God help us. But Richard, how do you feel about sometimes? And I get there would be people in the back, and they're so condescending, particularly the Park Avenue people, when they would get in, driver, could you slow down? Could you turn off the radio? Could you put up the heat? And they would be sitting next to the window where the button is. Driver, could you put up the window? I'm there, Fangul, put up the window. Just put your finger over there. Well, but when
Richard's not going to talk about the people in his
No, not him, but I've seen it. You pull up, and they will not get out of the cab. And they go, driver, could you beep the horn? Right. And you beep the horn. Driver, could you beep the horn again? Can you just get out of the cab?
Yeah,
and they will not move until you come out. Yeah. Particularly if it's raining, God forbid, if water falls on their head, they'll melt like the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz. Oh, they will. Right. But do you find that? I mean, they are so condescending, some of those people, and they treat you like
hell. I work at, it's predominantly very good folks. But yeah, I've had a couple of people wait for me I was on the phone one time talking to another tenant, and I couldn't get to the door, and she just put her shopping bags down and didn't budge until I sprinted to the door. So I just did it with I was biting my lip not to say anything, but sometimes you just have to tough it out,
Right. No, because they treat you like hell. Like particularly from you are working and you're worried about Christmas, which is a big day. Right. I'm pulling, turn off this, do this, don't go that way. You're with me for about 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes. I mean, come on. But all right, that's my pet peeve. Back to Astoria.
The doorman thing. I think the doorman thing's more interesting. But is there some kind of overlap between the historian work? I was going to say the bridge, but I mean, just in general, a lot of the historical stuff that you do and you do with the Greater Astoria Historical Society. And the dorm. I mean, obviously the overlap is that you use some of the doorman hours, those idle hours. To
no doubt,
work,
no doubt.
You know what? It's not like one job informs the other, right?
Right. Well, I'm good at what I do, and I'm pretty personable, and I'm glad I took the job. And it just so happens at 3 a.m. I could look at any book I want to, but my primary function is to not lock people out and help them as needed. But otherwise, it works out well for me because at night, like I said, you can look at any book in the whole world. That's what makes it great.
Now, Richard, I know this would not pertain to you at all, but around Christmas, what are some of the tactics the other doorman use to make sure that tip comes down? And what are the penalties where apartment 3A did not tip this year? Does the garbage go out a little later, or I don't open the door as quick? I mean,
well, there's a couple of apartments in the past that had like 2 doctors living in there. And for 2 doctors not to tip you as a doorman is ludicrous. Don't live in a doorman building if you're not going to, as my colleagues would say,
that's
throw down at
malpractice, man.
Christmas time, Yeah. But you can't help anybody less. You still have to do what you have to do.
Right.
And it's good. It's good, so you can't complain about it.
And how do you alert them to know it's Christmas? Because it's such a minor holiday in the Christian calendar that they might forget in some of the rooms. Is there certain ways of alerting the people in the building that, hey, it's Christmas? Don't want to say anything, but.
Well, one year it was about a day. It was right after the Epiphany, Little Christmas, when the Christmas tree is supposed to come down. And one woman said to me with a little bit of an attitude, she said, "Isn't Christmas over?" And I had said, "Well, we haven't gotten all our envelopes yet." And
nice. She did not
think that was very funny.
That was smooth.
So I know. So I had to note to self: do not repeat that attempt at comedy.
Right. That is great. You should put out a handbook. Like a doorman handbook. But not for doormen, for the tenants.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, you know what? On the flip side, I've had a couple of colleagues that really don't work that hard either. So I can understand.
There you go. It goes both ways.
Complaint too. Yes, it does.
Right. Yeah. So I'm glad we got you on to talk about the Hellgate Bridge. I mean, this has been so educational.
All right.
But we'll just talk about. I mean, are these? I know you guys over at the Greater Astoria Historical Society. Am I saying the name correctly? There's so many words in that name, and they all rhyme with Historia and Astoria. You're an Astorian historian, right? I guess.
So, Richard, what do you call Astoria now? When I was growing up as a kid, my parents, 6 of us, Irish immigrant family, Astoria pool. That was our great
I
trip.
still go to the pool.
Right,
Pool.
but we used to know it as a Greek neighborhood. You're going to Astoria, it's a Greek neighborhood. What is it now? I mean, it's changing.
There's still a lot of Greeks here, but it's like the rest of Queens. It's a microcosm of the world.
Right.
If you walk a mile on 30th Avenue or Broadway, you could probably go to 40 or 50 different ethnic restaurants. And it's also gentrifying, and a lot of development is going on. So they're bringing more people in, but the rail lines, the infrastructure is not backing it up. Like in the 19-teens and the 1920s, when the Queensboro Bridge opened, the city also matched the population shift with infrastructure, with new rail lines. And now that they're doing that again, it's not being if you ever try to catch the 7 train from Hunters Point in the morning, it's almost impossible.
You're not getting on at Jackson Avenue either. I mean,
well, there's 10,000 people every 5 minutes trying to get on those trains there. You know
what I heard doing? I talked to a friend of mine, Jerry, one of the Cuba boys. He lives in Williamsburg with the L train. He goes to Bedford Avenue, and he has to go to the hospital, Sloan Kettering. he takes the L train going in the opposite direction, 3 or 4 stops,
Just to
crosses
get a seat
over
sometimes.
to get in a seat.
Yeah, yeah.
You got to be kidding me! You get a seat on the stock exchange before you get a seat on the L train, and that he would go 3 or 4 stops, maybe up to say Bushwick Avenue, hop over to the other side, and then come into Manhattan. I mean, that's how bad the L train is, and I know that's what's going on in Astoria. I mean, it's just.
It's
overpopulating, so that's essentially it.
So listen, before we close, just mention what are all the festivities over with for this Hellgate?
No. What we're doing, on Saturday, last Saturday, the 25th, we did an Instagram walking tour. We had about 70 people and a lot of younger folks, the Instagram crowd. They uploaded to Instagram. They had prizes for best photographs of the bridge and other parts of Astoria that we walked through.
Right.
And then we just had an event the other day on the 27th with a bunch of Amtrak executives and personnel. So we celebrated the bridge again. But sometime in May or June, I'll be leading for open house for the Jane Jacobs Walk, Jane's Walk. In early May, I'll be leading a walking tour from the Manhattan side, 125th Street, onto Randall's Island, and we're going to analyze the bridge from the Bronx all the way across. We're going to walk over the Triborough and end at the Bohemian Hall Beer Garden.
There you go. Well, that's a great little run there. So how can people get more information or sign up for that? Just tell people how to contact you or the group.
It's the Greater Astoria Historical Society, www.astorialic.org, and all of our upcoming trips will be tours about the bridge, and everything else we do will be on that website.
All right, and it's a great group, and not just for local history, but you guys do a lot of events, and Bob Singleton he knows so much, and he's great with the
he's a brilliant man. Yeah, no doubt.
So
we do a lot of good work, and I love it. I got the history bug as a young kid. My dad worked for Pan Am for 39 years, so I did a little traveling as a youngin' out in Nassau County, and it's never. I haven't looked back. It's all been good.
That's great. All right, Richard, thanks a lot for coming on.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Talk to you soon. Yeah.
And next time we talk, we'll talk a little more about the bridge, okay?
Right. Yeah. Well, that too. Right.
The 200th anniversary. Yeah.
There you go. Cheers.
But it is the fascination of the relationship with Doorman to the people that live in the building, and the way they flag down cabs, and like he says, that's almost ending. You don't see Doorman out on the street with the umbrella and whistles and flagging down. That seems to be something that's fading into history. And he was talking about the Pan Am airline. I know Pan Am, not so much by but by the Pan Am building, which is no longer called the Pan Am building. And people might not realize it, but there used to be a heliport on top of the Pan Am building that you could fly and land on top of it. But that ended when one of the helicopters crashed on top of it and went spiraling down onto Park Avenue. And they did away with a heliport on top of the Pan Am building, which probably sounded good at the time, with airplanes coming in helicopters.
It's like very Batman-esque.
Yeah. I mean, particularly if you worked at that building, I don't even know where the helicopters were coming in from, maybe the airport, and landing on top of the Pan Am building, right down there on 46th Street and Park. Well, last week we were covering, the wake or Jimmy Breslin dying, and we had on Jimmy Breslin wrote a book called Table Money, and it was about the sandhogs of New York City, and you had on a guy named Chicky Donahue. Now, how did you find Chicky Donahue? Now it seems, like he was the go-to guy for sandhogs?
Yeah, if it's a story that involves sandhogs, which is, the workers who dig the tunnels under New York, the water tunnels and the sewer tunnels and train tunnels, and Chick was a long-time sandhog and kind of a union go-to guy. So he'd be the guy you'd call to talk to sandhogs, talk about what they do. So I knew him from that, and then I knew that he showed around Jimmy Breslin when Jimmy Breslin was researching his book Table Money, which is a backdrop of Sandhog's, what they, culture and what they do. And so I wrote a little short thing that Chick's remembrances of how Breslin, did his research and talked to the Sandhogs in researching his book. And then Chick started almost like as a footnote to the conversation, he mentioned the greatest beer on ever, which was like, I heard it as like a bar story that came out of like in the late 60s. And he served, and many of his friends from growing up in Inwood served in Vietnam, and a lot of them never came back, or came back in a box, and he buried many friends from Vietnam, and then when the anti-Vietnam protests were going on, he was sitting in a bar in Inwood one day, and the bartender said, it's a shame that this is happening, and that a lot of guys are fighting over there, and someone should go buy him a beer. So kind of Chick in a way took that literally and went basically, and he'll tell us the details, but he basically hitchhiked his way over, or worked his way over to Vietnam with a duffel bag full of Pabst Blue Ribbons, and he bought his friends a beer and found his way to them and had a beer with them and visited them.
And there's a 10-minute documentary. We're going to ask him now. I think it might even be sponsored by Pabst Blue Ribbon, because that was the beer of choice back in his time up in the Piper's Kilt or up there in Inwood.
Right. Chick, thanks for coming on. And what bar was it?
It was Doc Fiddler's.
Yeah. Okay. And that was that your
which I went on to buy a couple of years later.
Do you still own it?
No.
All right. Doc Fiddler's. Yeah. Well, that was your neighborhood bar, though, I guess, huh?
Yeah, that was a neighborhood bar. The bartender was George Lynch, the Colonel.
So pick up the story from there. We have about 10 minutes, but I mean, and I'm just on the eve of your book's about to come out about this with Joanna Malloy helping you write it, the greatest beer run ever. But pick up the story. You're at Doc Fiddler's. You had come back from Vietnam fairly recently, and you were talking about the protests were on TV, and what happened?
Well, I had, before all of this, I had served 4 years in the Marine Corps. And I was in Manhattan one day, and I was going through Central Park. There was a big demonstration going on there, and it got me angry and sad and a whole bunch of different emotions. And I knew there was nothing I could do, and it was a shame. I didn't know what to do, but no matter if I knew what to do, I wouldn't. How could I do it? There was 100,000 people there at least, going nuts. And so I went in uptown, and I went into Doc's, and George Lynch was the bartender. And it was on TV, the same demonstration. And he says, gee, this is no good. This is can you imagine if them guys, I hope they don't have TV over there. They'd be sitting in the USO or the Enlisted Men's Club watching this on TV. They must feel stupid. Anyway, what can we do for them? How can we show our support? So it was the Colonel suggested, you know what they need? They need somebody from the neighborhood to go over there, buy them all a beer, tell them how much we love them, support them, thank them for doing what they're doing, and all that sort of stuff. So, and he said, you've been there a couple of times, right, Chick? I says, yeah. He says, let me borrow your Siemens papers. I'll go over there and do that. Well, obviously he couldn't ask for me, and he just couldn't get away with it. So I told him, George, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Next time I'm over there, I'll make sure I go see all the guys. If you get me a list that would help, I'll look them up. So I came back the next day, and Tommy Collins' mother was there, an Irish woman with a real thick brogue. And I'll never forget the way she said it to me. She says, oh, Chickie, you're going over to see my Tommy. Oh, tell him I pray for him every day and all that. And she tried to give me $100. Well, God, if I would have ever taken that $100, I couldn't have come back alive without seeing Tommy. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't take the 100. But he had a bunch of addresses for me. So I said, okay, I'm in now. So I went down to Union Hall the next day, and as it happened, there was a ship in port leaving that afternoon. They call it a pierhead. The name of it was the SS Drake Victory. It just came out of mothball, and they refurbished it, and it was loaded with ammo. It was docked out in Leonardo, New Jersey. So I had to get out there. Well, I got the ship. I competed for the ship, but I got the ship. And I went out there, got on the ship. We sailed that evening. Mm-hmm. And it was,
How long was the voyage?
Oh, it was about 2 weeks to Panama.
Through the Panama Canal.
Yeah, and then a day through the canal. And then I'll never forget, it was 31 days. I counted them. 31 days from Panama Canal to the first port in Quinon, and the only port in Vietnam, which was Quinon. We didn't see a tree except for a couple of days before. So we knew we were getting close to Vietnam when we saw our first land. And as it worked out, we pulled in. I was the ship's chairman. I was always active with the union, and I was the ship's chairman just because nobody ever wanted that job. It was a terrible job. But I had worked out some ships with guys, and I was treated a little bit differently by the captain, though I would never talk to him anyway. So as soon as we pulled into the port, I went to him. I told him my stepbrother was up in a couple of miles away, and, we lost Mom. I gave him a sob story, and I had to go and buy him a drink. I had to go and see him and tell him some family news, boop. And he says, and I knew captain's only worried about that the ship was manned. He says, as long as your watches are manned, I got no problem. So I left. And I get on a little bumboat, like a taxi, a water taxi, and there was MPs there on the water taxi. It was a military boat, and it was taking them to relieve some guys at another ship, another ammunition ship. They dropped some guards at my ship. We were out on the anchor out in the harbor, and I asked them. I noticed on the helmets it was the same company that Tommy Collins was in. 127 MP Battalion or something. So I said, any of you guys know Tommy Collins? And they said, from New York? I said, yeah, from New York. Yeah, we know Tommy Collins. As a matter of fact, we're going to relieve him. That ship over there, he's on that ship over, isn't he over there? Yeah, he's over there. I said, can I go with you? Sure. So they took me over to the ship, and Collins was waiting to be relieved, standing at the top of the gangway, looking at his relief coming. And he's staring at me, but, he just discounted it couldn't be me. And when we got to the bottom of the gangway, I yelled out, hey, Collins. He says, oh, my God. Chicky, what the hell are you doing here? I said, the colonel sent me over here to buy you guys a drink. And that was it.
Yeah.
So we come down and up. I gave him a beer. We had a lot of laughs. So we just giggled. We're like school kids giggling. And he got relieved with his other guys, and we went back to his barracks. It wasn't really barracks, but it had passed his barracks outside of Quinon. And we all went back into Quinon, and we spent the night partying in Quinon. And while we were in a bar in Quinon, there was a guy there with a first cav patch on his shoulder. And that was the outfit. That was the 1st Air Cavalry Division. And Ricky Dugan was next on my list. And he grew up with me in the same building in Inwood. I knew him all his life. So I said to the guy, I said, do you know this company? Oh, yeah, I know that outfit. He's up in Ankh, up in the Highlands. So I said, I got to get up there. He's my stepbrother, and pop. No problem. I'll never forget his Texas accent. And he was like a crew chief on a plane. He says, if you come down to the tarmac at 0800, you can get on my plane. I'll bring you up there. So we partied all night, and Collins brought me to the tarmac at 0800, and here was the Texan. Hey, you made it. Come on, get aboard. So I got aboard, and I flew up to Ankh. Got to Ankh and found his company. There was nobody there. The whole outfit had moved out early that morning. The only guy left behind was an African-American supply sergeant. I say that because of the way he spoke to me. I said, I'm looking for my stepbrother, Dugan, and, he says, he's gone. He went up north. They all went north. So I told him the sob story. I don't know why. And he says, listen, I'd like to help you. He says, but I'll tell you what, if you want, you can write him a note, a letter or something, and he'll get it this afternoon. I said, you don't even know where he went, just up north, but you're telling me you can deliver a letter to him this afternoon. And he says, yeah. He says, we got a 1,300 mail run going. Don't you know that? How stupid could you be? So I said, okay. So I said, can I get on that mail run? And that's when he said it to me in a New York accent. He said, you got here, didn't you? So I guess he meant you might be able to get on that mail run.
That's great.
So I went down, started back to the airfield, and there was nobody there on that base where I was. And it was like a mile away to the airfield, and it's a straight road through the jungle, all dusty, dirty old road, nothing there, not a fire plug, not a light, not a building, not a shed, nothing. And I'm walking down the road trying to get to this 1,300 mail run. By now it was afternoon. So I'm practically running through the jungle. Then I see a dust coming towards me, a vehicle, obviously. So I flagged the guy down. And he says, what's the matter? I said, I got to get to the airfield. Can you give me a lift? Yeah, jump in. So I jumped in the back, and the guy says, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to find some buddies up north. And the guy said, Chicky. I said, Kevin, what the hell are you doing here? He was on my list, Kevin McCool. So that's how I met the second guy. The second guy. And so we drank some beer. He got me to the mail run on time. I got on the plane and flew up to Dubai, I think it was. And on that plane, there was a couple of kids, young guys, GIs who were coming back from hospital. They had been wounded. And they were in Charlie Company, 1st, 2nd Battalion, whatever Dugan's outfit was. So I asked them if they knew him. Yeah, they knew Sergeant Dugan. So I said, well, I told them the story, the truth. And one kid laughed. The other kid, I thought he was going to, if he could have got off the plane in the middle of the air, he would have. He wanted nothing to do with me. He knew I'd be trouble for him. So he said, we shouldn't even be talking to this guy. Where can you go? We're strapped in on this old military plane flopping through the sky.
These guys had assumed you had some official capacity, I guess, right? You were so self-assured and everything.
Everybody did. I'm flying around on planes. You find out anybody was in Vietnam, I'll tell you, you can't go anywhere in that country without orders.
Right.
You got to have orders. I never had orders.
I didn't
even have a passport.
It's just such an amazing thing. But just because we got to start wrapping up, I do want to let you give the information to listeners. I mean, suffice to say that the whole story is full of unbelievable details about a guy who'd go back to
the best detail is they all came back alive.
That's great. Yeah, right.
And I see them all now.
Right, and that's
no
small
all
detail.
Part of this book.
Right.
That's on Amazon. It'll be released May 1st, and it tells the story, and their story is told in there. And my co-author, Joanna Malloy, who was a reporter for the Daily News for, 25 years or something, and that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
And so it's the greatest beer run ever. What's the publisher?
It's self-published.
Oh, self-published. Okay, and it's coming out. Well, it's available online now, right?
Yeah, for delivery May 1st.
And Chicky, how can you watch the 10-minute documentary?
Which is great.
On YouTube. You can get it on YouTube. Same thing, the greatest beer run ever.
You know what, Chicky, I wanted to ask you, all these years later and what you thought about the protest in Central Park, how do you feel now, all these years later, about the war in Vietnam?
Well, it's crazy, but I see all of this lying from our government, every branch of it. They're all equal liars. All right, one guy is obviously a star. But I learned that one of the lessons I got out of Vietnam was that is government policy. They all lie. Whatever their story is, they're going to say it, whether it's true or not. Even if they have to make it up. They made up numbers. They made up facts. They lied through their teeth during that war. They're still lying through their teeth. I mean, it's government, to me, it's government policy. They can't tell the truth. This guy just is everybody can see it in a personality, but it's rampant throughout the whole government. You couldn't go to the motor vehicle department and get information from them that had nothing to do with the truth. I mean, if they had to tell you a complete falsehood, they wouldn't hesitate. They just tell you. That's the story. It's terrible.
Well, Chicky, I know one thing. I see that you hang out at the Piper's Kilt up on Broadway. You're going to a little bit more Weld-Heel place this afternoon or this evening down at the 21 Club. Who knows? You can bump into the president down there. That's one of his favorite joints.
The 21 Club this evening between 6 and 8 will be full of union guys. And they support the New York Friends of Ireland, which supports funds for kids' programs in Ireland, both north and south.
These guys got to wear a suit. You got to wear a jacket and tie to get in there, Chick. You know that?
Nobody will throw you out with us.
They're going to run out of jackets they normally would hand you at a place like that, wouldn't they?
Right. Yeah.
Probably wouldn't fit anyway, Chicky.
Well, if you're a union construction worker in New York City and you're working, you can afford the 21 Club.
Yeah. Chicky, how did you get the name Chicky?
Chicory Chick, Chala Chala, in the Banana, Monica, Chicory Chick is me.
And how did you get it?
You knew that was going to be a
secret. I used to sing it before I could actually talk. I used to sing it. My father played the piano during the war, and pop, that was up there in the hit parade, and he played the piano, and I sang the song.
Well, there it is. Great. Now we've got everything
Chick,
covered.
Thanks so much. That was great.
God.
Yeah, what
there
stories,
anything
man?
We don't know now. We have to
We're going to have him on every week. All right.